So in this tutorial we have been able to create a user page and a login page in PHP and MySQL. So let's see if there are some improvements to be made. First, here's the current status. We have made this library application. So this is the front page where you have a login button, and when the user clicks on the login button, he goes to this login page and he enters his username and password in order to log in. And then when he logged in, he goes back to this main page, the library page, and then he gets access to a list of books. Because if you are not logged in, you have no access to this list of books. And then if the user clicks on this button or hyperlink, he goes to this book page where he can see all the books that are stored in the MySQL database in this case. And also the login button has changed to log out. And if the user clicks the log out button, then he goes back to this page where it says login, and this list of books, as you see here, is not available from this page as long as you are not logged into the library application. So that's the status of this application now. But there are of course lots of improvements to be made. I will just list some examples. It's up to you what you want to create in your applications. But some typical examples of improvements. Typically you need to check if this if you are logged in or not for all your web pages. So far in this books app I haven't actually checked if the user are logged into the system or not. So if you manually enter this URL in your browser, you can get access to this list of books even if you are not logged into the system, because there is no check in the code if the user is logged in or not. So that's an improvement to make in all web pages that you don't want the user to have access to. If he's not logged in, you need to check, typically in the upper part of the PHP code, to check if the user is actually logged in or not. Just like I did in this library page, where I checked if the user is logged in or not, and then based on that, the contents of the web page is changing like this. So that's one thing. To make it even more secure, you can add two-factor authentication. You can also add authorization. You can of course improve the graphical user interface, the human-machine interface, your code structure and the quality of your code, etc. So let's start with an overview of two-factor authentication. So how can we implement two-factor authentication on our web pages in this login page? Of course, there are different ways to do it. You can use email. You can send a unique verification code on email, or you can send it on SMS, or you can use one of these applications, authorization applications from Microsoft, Google, etc. to implement this functionality. Typically in PHP, it's quite easy to implement two-factor authentication by using the built-in email function. And then basically in the login page, you can just create a unique verification code, like using this built-in function called unique ID. This generates a unique number, and then you can send this unique number on email by using this mail and email functions in PHP. Then you send this unique verification code on email to the user that are supposed to log in, and then he will retrieve that verification code on email, and then he needs to enter that verification code on the login page. So here you see a typical flow chart how to implement two-factor authentication. So this is on the client side, the red one is on the PHP server side. So here on the login page on the client side, the user needs to enter his email and password, and then on the server side, you need to verify that information that are stored in the database, and if the email and the password is correct according to the information stored in the database, you can generate a unique verification code, then send that verification code on email. Then the user will receive a verification code on email, and then on the login page he needs to enter that verification code. And then on the server side you need to check that the verification code entered by the user is the same verification code that you generated here. And if that's correct, then the user is approved and the user is logged in. And then you have these different built-in functions in PHP that you can use. You have this password_verify. To verify the password, you can use this unique ID function in order to generate a unique verification code. Then you use the mail function in order to send an email to the customer or the person that wants to log in to the system. And then finally you can use this session functionality to set that the actual user has been logged in to the system. And then you will check for that session variable in the different web pages that you need to check if the user is logged in or not. So basically that's how you can implement a basic two-factor authentication in your PHP application. Next, another improvement would be to also implement what we call authorization. So now in this tutorial we have focused on authentication, but typically authorization is something you also want to have in your applications. So basically there's a difference between authentication and authorization. So then authentication that we have focused on so far in this tutorial is a process to actually authenticate a user to verify that that user actually say who he is. So then basically check if the password he enters is the same as the password stored in the database. While authorization is about determining the user's level of access and then granting access based on that level. So let's take our library application as an example. And then typically we can have different types of users. We could have administrator users. Typically they can add new users, edit, delete users, etc. And then you can have another access level like the librarians, and they can create new books, edit books, delete books, and they can also of course see information regarding the different books, how many has rented the different books, etc. And then finally we have the customers. They typically have only access to the book information, but they cannot create new books or edit or delete books, but they can rent books, see if any books are available to rent or not, etc. And this can be implemented in different ways, but typically you need to start to add one or more new database tables or columns in your database. So in this simplified authorization example, typically a user logs in with his username and password, and based on his username and password you can get access to different functionality or features in your application. So assume that user has customer access level, then he gets access to typically to read data only. If he has an access level similar to a librarian, then he can get access to creating new books, etc. And if that user is an administrator, he can get access to create, edit and delete users, etc. And in order to make that happen, typically you need to create one or more database tables in your database. You have already this table called user, and then you can, with username and password, and then you can add a new column called access level, and then typically in this new table called access level you can define the different levels like customer, librarian, administrator, etc. And also here in another table you can define the different features or functionality that belongs to the different levels of access like this. So this is just one example how to implement authorization in your database and in your PHP web application. So finally, let's summarize this create user page and login page in PHP and MySQL. So this is the final application that we have created, this library application. Administrators can create new users, etc. And then when a user wants to log into that application, this library application, you just click on the login button, and then he opens this login page where he can enter his username and password in order to get access to the library application. Here you see the different PHP files that we have created as part of this application. Here you also find some additional resources, references, etc. If you want to create your own logging functionality in your applications. So that's all, I guess. So thank you and goodbye.